The reflection staring back at me was half stranger, half memory. 13 years old when the fire claimed more than just my skin. It stole my visibility. I watched them erase me. Photos disappearing from walls, place settings quietly removed, voices lowering whenever I entered rooms. "It's easier this way," they'd whisper, as if I couldn't hear them deciding I no longer existed. For 8 years, I became a ghost in my own home, a secret they kept even from themselves. They thought they'd written the end of my story. But fire doesn't just destroy, it transforms. And while they were busy pretending I disappeared, I was quietly becoming someone they wouldn't recognize. Someone who would step into the spotlight and force them to see exactly what they'd tried so hard to forget. They weren't ready for the girl who emerged from the ashes.
They weren't ready for me.
Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. I remember running barefoot through the grass during our summer cookout, before everything burned. The cool blades tickled between my toes as I chased fireflies with my little sister Amy and brother Tyler. Mom had strung fairy lights across our backyard, and Dad was grilling his famous honey-glazed ribs. Everyone was laughing. I can still hear the sound of ice clinking in glasses and smell the charcoal smoke mixing with summer jasmine. "Gianna, come blow out your candles," Mom called, her smile wide and genuine back then. 13 is a big one. I had no idea how big that day would truly be. It happened so fast. Dad was refilling the grill's propane tank in the garage, while Uncle Rick was messing with the water heater pilot light. Something about helping Dad upgrade it as a surprise. I'd wandered in looking for more paper plates, unaware of the invisible danger filling the air. The last thing I remember was the click of a lighter, then a wall of heat and sound that seemed to swallow the world. I woke up drowning in darkness. The steady beep of machines and the chemical smell of antiseptic filled my senses. I couldn't open my left eye. I couldn't move my arms. Everything felt tight, like my skin had shrunk 3 sizes. The pain came in waves, sometimes dull, sometimes sharp enough to make me whimper. "She's awake," a nurse's voice said softly. I felt a cool hand on my forehead, and then my mother's face appeared above me. But something was wrong. Her eyes were different, cold and distant, like she was looking at a stranger instead of her daughter. Her lips formed a tight line as she studied me. "You're lucky to be alive," she said flatly, her hands remaining at her sides. No hug, no tears of relief. Just those words hanging in the sterile air between us. For 3 weeks, I drifted in and out of consciousness. The doctor said I'd been caught in a gas explosion. 13% of my body covered in third-degree burns. Most concentrated on the left side of my face, neck, and shoulder. They used words like grafts and debridement that meant nothing to me then. All I understood was pain and the growing silence that surrounded me. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. The nurses had stepped out, and my room was dark except for the glow of monitors. I disconnected the 4, ignoring the burning sensation as the needle slipped from my arm. My legs shook as I shuffled to the small bathroom attached to my hospital room. I flipped the switch and squinted against the harsh fluorescent light. Then I saw me for the first time. Half my face was unrecognizable. Red, raw, twisted skin stretched from my left temple down to my collarbone. My left eyebrow was gone. My ear was partially melted. My once long brown hair had been shaved on that side. I pressed my fingers against the glass, waiting for the reflection to reveal the trick. But there was no trick.
This was me now.
I didn't cry. I just stared, memorizing every new contour, every shade of damaged skin. This face would be mine forever. When they finally released me from the hospital, I thought things would get better at home. I was wrong. The first night back, I heard whispers in the hallway outside my bedroom. The door was cracked open just enough for their voices to slip through. "It's cruel to keep her here," my Aunt Linda said. "The children will never adjust. Have you looked into specialized facilities?" "She'll never be the same," my mother replied, her voice hollow. "Tyler had nightmares again last night. Amy won't even look at her." "What about school?" Aunt Linda asked. "Homeschooling," Mom answered quickly. We've already withdrawn her. I lay in bed, perfectly still, letting their words wash over me like acid. They spoke about me as if I'd died, as if what came home was just a problematic ghost they needed to manage. The next morning, I noticed the changes had already begun. The family portrait in the living room, taken just months before at Christmas, was gone. In its place hung a generic landscape painting. In the hallway, photos of me had disappeared, leaving conspicuous empty spaces on the wall. My school backpack had vanished from its hook by the door. Within weeks, a pattern emerged. Dad would leave for work before dawn. Mom would drop Tyler and Amy at school, then return to a house where she barely acknowledged my existence. My homeschooling consisted of worksheets left on the kitchen table and textbooks I was expected to work through alone. "Your father and I are taking the kids to the lake this weekend," Mom announced one Thursday evening, not quite meeting my eyes as she folded laundry. "Can I come?" I asked, my voice small. "Oh, honey," she sighed. "You know you can't. Your skin is too sensitive to the sun right now. And you haven't been feeling well. It's better if you stay here and rest." I hadn't been sick. I felt fine physically. It was everything else that hurt. But I nodded and retreated to my room. That Sunday afternoon, I heard laughter from the driveway. Peering through my blinds, I watched them unload the car, sun-kissed and smiling. Amy was wearing a new swimsuit. Tyler was carrying a trophy from some competition. They looked like the perfect family of four. The doorbell rang the next day, while Mom was at the grocery store. I hesitated before answering, conscious of my appearance. It was Jenny Peterson, a girl from the neighborhood who used to come to my birthday parties. "Hi," she said, her eyes widening slightly before she controlled her expression. I brought you something." She handed me a small container with a single cupcake inside. Chocolate with vanilla frosting and rainbow sprinkles. "Thanks," I whispered, stunned by the simple kindness. She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned closer. "Why don't they let you come outside anymore?" she asked. I opened my mouth, but no answer came. I truly didn't know. The rules changed gradually, so subtly that I almost didn't notice until they were firmly established. I was no longer allowed to eat with the family. Mom would leave my plate on the counter, and I was expected to eat in my room or wait until they were finished. "It's easier this way," Dad explained when I finally asked why. "Tyler gets upset when he sees you while he's eating." The family bathroom became off-limits too. I was relegated to using the small half-bath near the laundry room. My toothbrush and hairbrush disappeared from the main bathroom, along with any trace that I shared this house with them. One afternoon, I overheard Mom on the phone in the kitchen. I froze in the hallway, listening. "No, we couldn't make it to the fundraiser," she was saying to someone. "Gianna is, well, she's living with my cousin upstate right now. The recovery is taking longer than expected. It's a special facility." I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding. I was literally 20 feet away, yet my mother was erasing me from existence with her lies. The mailman delivered a letter from the school district the following week. I watched from the window as Mom opened it, her face tightening. Later, I snuck a look at the papers she'd left on her desk. It was about my educational status. She'd falsified an address, claiming I lived with relatives in another district. There was a form about homeschooling requirements that she'd signed but never fulfilled. My lifeline appeared in the form of Mrs. Ellerby, an elderly librarian who had known me since I was small enough to sit in her lap during story hour. She started dropping by with books, claiming to Mom that she was clearing out duplicates from the library. "These need a good home," she'd say, handing me a canvas bag full of treasures while Mom hovered uncomfortably in the doorway. Mrs. Ellerby never flinched at my appearance. Her eyes, magnified by thick glasses, would look directly into mine as she asked, "What did you think of the last batch?" She brought me notebooks, too. "For your thoughts," she said. "Every great writer needs to start somewhere." "I'm not a writer," I protested. "Not yet," she replied with a wink. "But you're a girl who has seen dragons. Those are the best kind of writers." I began filling those notebooks with stories about girls who fought dragons, who survived fires, who lived in towers but found ways to build their own doors. At night, When the house was silent, I'd write by flashlight until my hand cramped. One night, I wrote in my journal, "If I vanished tomorrow, would they tell anyone I was ever here?" The question haunted me for days. I started spending more time studying my reflection, not out of vanity, but as a form of reclaiming what was mine. I'd stand in the half-bath mirror, practicing smiles, seeing how the scarred half of my face moved differently from the unmarked half. I'd angle my face in different ways, imagining how it might look in various lighting, harsh sunlight versus soft lamplight, how shadows might soften the ridges of scar tissue. When Easter approached, I gathered my courage and approached Mom while she was ironing Tyler's shirt. "Can I go to church with you on Sunday?" I asked. Her iron paused mid-stroke. She didn't look up. "Not this year, honey," she said softly. "Maybe next year when things are different." But we both knew things wouldn't be different. My scars weren't going to disappear. The worst betrayal came from Tyler. At 15, he'd once been my protector, the big brother who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with math homework. Now he pretended I didn't exist. One Saturday, he had friends over to play video games. I was heading downstairs when I heard my name. "Dude, does your sister still live here?" "The one from the accident?" a boy asked. There was a pause, then Tyler's laugh, forced and hollow. "Yeah, Frankenstein upstairs. Mom won't let us put a lock on the door in case she catches fire again." The boys laughed. I retreated silently to my room. Mrs. Ellerby visited again the following week, this time with information about a nationwide creative writing contest for young adults. "The theme is invisible voices," she explained, her eyes bright with excitement. "It's perfect for you, Gianna." For the next 2 weeks, I wrote and rewrote a story titled The Girl with No Shadow. It was about a girl who became invisible after a curse, but discovered she could still cast reflections in unexpected places, puddles after rain, the backs of spoons, the eyes of strangers who truly looked. It wasn't subtle, but it was honest. Mrs. Ellerby helped me submit it, using her address for the contact information. 3 weeks later, the phone rang while Mom was preparing dinner. I was sitting at the kitchen table, invisible as usual, working on math problems. "This is the Pearson Literary Foundation," a woman's voice said when Mom answered. "We're calling about Gianna Walker." Mom's body stiffened. "Yes. Her submission to our Young Writers Contest has been selected as a finalist. The board thinks her work is exceptional. We'd like to meet her in person for the final judging round." Mom's knuckles whitened around the phone. "I'll let her know," she said stiffly. "She'll come." After hanging up, she turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "How did they get our number?" I shrugged. Mrs. Ellerby helped me enter. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll discuss this with your father." But I already knew what that meant. They would make excuses. They would keep me hidden. That night, I stared at my ceiling, something shifting inside me. For the first time in years, someone wanted to see me. Someone thought my voice mattered. I decided then that I would go. I just needed to figure out how. It started with small acts of rebellion. One night, after everyone was asleep, I slipped out my bedroom window and climbed down the oak tree that had been my childhood playground. The neighborhood was different at midnight, peaceful, accepting, unconcerned with appearances. I pulled my hoodie tight around my face and walked aimlessly, feeling the crisp night air on my skin. 3 blocks turned to 5, then 10, until I found myself standing outside a 24-hour diner called Molly's. The windows glowed warm yellow, and I could see a few people inside: truckers, night shift workers, insomniacs. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The bell jingled, but only the waitress glanced up briefly before returning to her crossword puzzle. I slid into a booth in the corner, ordered a cup of coffee with hands that trembled slightly, and experienced my first moment of freedom in years. I returned the next night, and the night after that. Sometimes I'd bring a notebook and write until dawn broke. Other times I'd just sit, watching people who didn't stare back. On my 5th visit, the diner was unusually busy. Every booth was full except for one occupied by a man in his early 30s with sandy brown hair and kind eyes. "Mind if I sit here?" I asked, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Everywhere else is full. He looked up from his book and smiled. Be my guest. His name was Jonah Williams. He worked nights as a security guard at the university library and came to Molly's during his break. He talked about books he was reading, music he liked, his dream of opening a community darkroom for photography. And not once, did his eyes linger on my scars or show that flicker of pity I'd grown accustomed to. After our third midnight conversation, I realized why. As he reached for the sugar, his sleeve pulled back, revealing a patch of rippled skin on his wrist that disappeared up his arm. Afghanistan, he said when he caught me looking. IED on my second tour. I got lucky, just my arm and back. My buddy wasn't so lucky. There was something freeing about sitting across from someone who understood, without explanations. With Jonah's encouragement, I grew bolder. I used the library computer to create an email address and contacted the Pearson Literary Foundation myself. I scheduled an interview under a pen name, Yes Ren, explaining that I prefer to keep my identity private until the final selection. They agreed. I told Jonah, still shocked by my own daring. I have a phone interview next Thursday. But I needed more than secret midnight escapes. I needed money, independence. Jonah introduced me to his friend Marcus, who worked at a copy shop and could create documentation for the right price. Nothing illegal, Jonah assured me. Just a work permit with your real name, but a different address. Something to help you get started. With my new papers, I applied for a job at Bookmark, a small independent bookstore 15 blocks from home. The owner, Valerie Scott, was a brisk woman in her 50s who asked few questions and seemed more concerned with whether I could alphabetize correctly than what I looked like. Shelving starts at 4 p.m., she said after a brief interview. Pay is weekly cash. Don't be late. My hands shook through my entire first shift. Every time the door opened, I was certain it would be my parents, coming to drag me home. But they never came. They didn't even notice I was gone for those hours. With my first paycheck, I bought clothes that I chose, not what Mom thought would cover me appropriately. A soft blue sweater with an asymmetrical neckline, jeans that actually fit, a leather jacket that made me feel stronger somehow. I started keeping my writing notebook at the bookstore, hidden behind the employee lockers. Each night at Molly's, I'd work on new pieces, refining my voice. Jonah would read them sometimes, offering gentle feedback. You should submit this one, he said one night, handing back a poem I'd written about metamorphosis. To where? I asked. The American Poetry Review. They have a new voices section. I laughed. They'd never publish me. Try, he insisted. Use your pen name. 3 months later, a small envelope arrived at the bookstore addressed to Yes Ren. Inside was a letter accepting my poem, Chrysalis, for publication in their spring issue. I read it 5 times before I believed it. That night, I showed Jonah. He hugged me, the first real human contact I'd had in years that wasn't medical or accidental. I stiffened at first, then melted into it, allowing myself to feel connected to another person. This is just the beginning, he whispered. He was right, though neither of us knew how right. When I returned home that night, something was wrong. Amy was sitting on my bed, holding one of my notebooks. One I thought I'd hidden well. What are you doing? I demanded, fear and anger rising in my throat. She looked up, her face twisted with emotions I couldn't read. At 17, she'd grown beautiful in the years I'd been hidden away. She was everything I might have been. You're writing about us, she accused. About Mom and Dad. About what happened. It's my story too, I said quietly. You're just making it worse for everyone, she hissed, standing up. We're trying to move on, and you keep dragging us back. Before I could stop her, she ripped pages from the notebook and struck a match from her pocket. No, I lunged forward, but she held me back with one arm, dropping the burning pages into my metal trash can. It's better this way, she said, echoing our mother's favorite phrase. She left without another word, leaving me to extinguish the small fire she'd created, another burn in my life. The next evening at the diner, I was unusually quiet. Jonah noticed immediately. What happened? He asked. I told him about Amy, about the burned notebook, about the years of pretending I didn't exist. I have something to show you, he said after I finished. He hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his shirt and turned around. His back was a landscape of scars, worse than mine. Rippled, discolored skin stretched from his shoulders to his waist. Third-degree burns over 40%, he said quietly. The doctors said I might not walk again. My fiancé left while I was still in the hospital. I couldn't handle it, she said. He turned back to face me, rebuttoning his shirt. For 2 years, I barely left my apartment. Thought my life was over. Then one day, I just got tired of hiding.
How?
I whispered. How did you stop caring what people see? I didn't, he admitted. I still care sometimes. But I decided that staying invisible was letting them win, the ones who couldn't see past this. He gestured to his scarred wrist. Your family has already taken enough from you, Gianna. Don't let them take your voice too. 2 days later, an official-looking envelope arrived at the bookstore. Inside was an invitation. Yes, Ren had been anonymously nominated for the Harrington Fellowship, a prestigious award for emerging writers. The fellowship included a monetary prize, publication opportunities, and culminated in a black-tie banquet where recipients would give acceptance speeches. My hands trembled as I read the details. The banquet would be held at the Grand Meridian Hotel downtown. My photo would be taken. My words would be heard. There would be no hiding. I can't do this, I told Jonah that night, sliding the invitation across the table. He read it carefully, then looked up at me with steady eyes. You can. And I'll be right beside you. They'll see me, I whispered. Good, he replied, taking my hand. It's about time someone did. As morning light filtered through the bookstore windows, I stood before a selection of formal dresses Valerie had brought in for me. My sister owns a boutique, she'd explained, waving away my protests. Try them on, keep what works. My fingers trembled as they brushed against silk, satin, and chiffon, fabrics I hadn't worn since before the fire. Each dress represented a possibility, a version of myself I might become on that stage. This one, Jonah said, lifting a shimmering silver gown with an asymmetrical neckline. Unlike the others, it had only one sleeve, leaving my right arm bare while draping elegantly over my left shoulder, the scarred side. I can't, I whispered, my throat tightening. Everyone will see. That's the point, he replied gently. They'll see you, all of you, standing tall and brilliant. I took the dress with shaking hands and disappeared into the back room. When I emerged, Valerie gasped. Oh, honey, she said, her eyes wide. You're going to set that stage on fire. I winced at her choice of words, but Jonah just smiled. Different kind of fire this time, he said quietly. The kind that lights the way. For the next week, I practiced my acceptance speech in Jonah's apartment after my shifts at the bookstore. He would sit on his worn sofa, listening intently as I stumbled through drafts. Too formal, he said after my third attempt. Sounds like you're reading a term paper. What should I say? I asked, frustrated. Thank you for this award, and by the way, my family pretended I didn't exist for 5 years? Yes, he said simply. Tell the truth. Make them listen like they never did before. I rewrote the speech 17 times. The final version was 4 paragraphs long, but every word had purpose. Every sentence carried the weight of years spent in silence. 3 days before the banquet, the article appeared in the local newspaper. Yes, Ren to receive Harrington Fellowship for groundbreaking work on resilience. The piece mentioned my pen name, the mysterious nature of my identity, and quoted a line from my winning essay. Some survivors wear their scars on the inside. I wear mine where you can't ignore them. I was shelving books when Valerie rushed over, newspaper in hand. Gianna, you're not going to believe this, she said, voice low. There's a woman here asking about Yes Ren. Says she's your aunt. My blood ran cold. I peered around the shelves to see Aunt Linda standing at the counter, her designer purse clutched tightly against her side. How did she find me? I whispered. She didn't, not exactly, Valerie explained. She's asking if we carry any books by Yes Ren. Says her niece might be the author. I closed my eyes, steadying myself against the bookshelf. Tell her we don't have any information. That night, I called Jonah in a panic. They know, I said. My family knows about the award. Were you planning to keep it a secret forever? He asked gently. No, but I wanted to control how they found out. I paced across my small bedroom, keeping my voice low so my family wouldn't hear. What if they try to stop me? They can't, Jonah reminded me. You're 21 now. They have no legal control over you. They'll find a way, I insisted. They always do. The next day, I discovered how right I was. A second article appeared, this one connecting Yes Ren to Gianna Walker, the reclusive daughter of local insurance executive Robert Walker. The piece speculated about my absence from public life following a childhood accident and mentioned that the Walker family had been invited to the Harrington banquet as distinguished guests, given their daughter's achievement. That evening, for the first time in years, my mother knocked on my bedroom door. Gianna, she said, her voice strained. We need to talk. She sat stiffly on the edge of my bed, hands folded in her lap. She looked older than I remembered, fine lines etched around her eyes and mouth. The Harrington people called, she said. They've invited us to the banquet. Your father, and I think it's best if we attend. Why? I asked, the single word carrying years of hurt. Because we're your family, she said, as if it were obvious. This is a significant achievement. You haven't been my family since I was 13, I replied, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. You can't suddenly decide to claim me because I've done something worth acknowledging. Her face hardened. That's not fair, Gianna. We've provided for you. You've hidden me, I corrected. There's a difference. She stood abruptly. We'll be attending. I've already accepted the invitation. After she left, I called Jonah. They're coming, I said, my voice hollow. They think I won't show up. Then you'd better give them one hell of a surprise, he replied. The night of the banquet arrived with a crystalline clarity. Every detail seemed magnified. The scratch of the silver dress against my skin, the weight of the simple pearl earrings Valerie had loaned me, the steady pressure of Jonah's hand against the small of my back as we approached the service entrance of the Grand Meridian Hotel. Ready, he asked, handsome in his rented tuxedo. I nodded, unable to speak. We had planned this carefully. I would enter through the side, avoid the main reception, and remain backstage until my name was called. The Walkers would be seated at their table, unaware that the ghost of their daughter was about to materialize. The banquet hall glittered with chandeliers and candlelight. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see them, my family, dressed in their finest, seated at a table near the front. Mom in midnight blue, Dad in his best suit, Tyler looking uncomfortable in a tie. Amy, beautiful in emerald green, scanning the room curiously. They had come for the spectacle, for the social currency of having a talented daughter they could suddenly acknowledge. My hands turned ice cold as the program began. 3 other writers received their awards first, each giving brief, gracious speeches. Then the moment arrived. And now, the presenter announced, the Harrington Fellowship's highest honor goes to a remarkable new voice in American letters, a writer whose work on resilience, identity, and transformation has moved our entire selection committee. Please welcome to the stage, Yes Ren. The spotlight swung toward the side stairs. Jonah squeezed my hand one last time. Show them who you really are, he whispered. I stepped into the light. 3 heartbeats. Nothing happened. Just the soft sound of my heels against the polished stage and the rustle of my dress. Then the murmurs began, rippling through the audience as they took in my face, both the unscarred side and the side marked by fire. The cameras clicked rapidly. The spotlight operator, momentarily startled, adjusted to follow me to the podium. That's when I saw her, my mother, half risen from her chair, one hand pressed against her mouth, visibly trembling. Beside her, my father had gone pale, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. Amy's eyes were wide with shock. Only Tyler seemed unsurprised, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I took my place at the microphone and unfolded my speech with steady hands. Thank you for this honor. I began, my voice stronger than I'd expected. I began writing because silence was untenable. When you live as a ghost in your own home, you must find ways to prove you exist. The room had gone completely still now. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, but I focused only on the 4 faces at that front table. Many of you have asked what inspired the girl with no shadow. The answer is simple. I wrote what I lived. When a tragedy changes your appearance, you discover who can still see you and who chooses to look away. Sometimes those who look away are strangers. Sometimes they share your blood. Mom sank back into her chair, her face ashen. Dad reached for her hand, but his eyes remained locked on me, seeing me, truly seeing me, perhaps for the first time in years. Resilience isn't about pretending the fire never happened, I continued. It's about acknowledging the flames, the scars they leave, and building something new from the ashes. Not despite them, but because of them. I delivered the rest of my speech directly to that front table, each word a stone laid on the path between who I had been and who I was becoming. When I finished, the audience erupted in applause, standing, cheering, some wiping tears. Everyone except my family. They sat frozen, unable to clap, unable to stand, unable to do anything but stare at the daughter they had tried to erase. As I descended the stairs, Jonah waited with a proud smile. Photographers called my name, my real name, asking for pictures. I turned, caught my father's eye across the room, and deliberately walked in the opposite direction. The media storm hit with unexpected force. By morning, my story had gone viral. The mysterious writer with burned scars, the family in the front row, the powerful speech about abandonment and resilience. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Email requests flooded my inbox. Ms. Walker, would you consider an exclusive interview? We'd like to offer you a book deal for your memoir. The Today Show is requesting you for next week. I sat at Jonah's kitchen table, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. For years, I had craved recognition, acknowledgement. Now that I had it, I wasn't sure what to do with it. You don't have to say yes to everything, Jonah reminded me, setting a cup of coffee in front of me. This is your story. You control how it's told. I nodded, grateful for his steadying presence. What about my family? What do I do about them? As if summoned by the question, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Gianna, it's Amy. Please call me. We need to talk. Then another. Mom and Dad want to see you. Please. By afternoon, flowers began arriving at the bookstore. First a small arrangement of lilies, then roses, then an elaborate display of orchids. Each card bore messages of apology, of reconnection, of family bonds that couldn't be broken. I placed them all in the break room for the other employees to enjoy. Valerie watched me with knowing eyes, but said nothing. 3 days after the banquet, a man in an expensive suit entered the bookstore. Ms. Walker? He asked, approaching the counter where I was working. I'm Howard Bernstein, your grandmother's attorney. My grandmother, my father's mother, had died 2 years earlier. I hadn't been allowed to attend the funeral. What can I do for you, Mr. Bernstein? I asked cautiously. Your grandmother left a trust in your name, he explained, placing a leather portfolio on the counter. She stipulated that it should remain sealed until you turned 21 or, and I quote, found your voice in the world. I believe recent events satisfy the second condition. I stared at him, uncomprehending. A trust? For me. Your grandmother was quite aware of your situation, he said delicately. She didn't agree with how things were handled. This was her way of ensuring you would have options when the time came. The documents inside revealed a trust worth over $2 million, along with a letter written in my grandmother's shaky hand. My dearest Gianna, it began. If you're reading this, I've failed to see you embrace your rightful place in the world. Know that I never forgot you, even when others tried to make you disappear. Use this freedom wisely. Build the life they told you wasn't possible. And remember, the strongest trees grow from burned ground. That evening, I returned to my parents' house to collect my belongings. Jonah waited in the car, ready if I needed him. I used my key to enter through the side door, hoping to avoid a confrontation. Tyler was in the kitchen, grabbing a soda from the refrigerator. He froze when he saw me. You're leaving, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Listen to this, he said, pressing play on a voice memo. My stomach dropped as I heard his voice from years ago. The same words I'd overheard him say to his friends. Yeah, Frankenstein upstairs. Mom won't let us put a lock on the door in case she catches fire again. The cruel laughter that followed made me flinch. I was such an asshole, Tyler said quietly, stopping the recording. I saved it to remind myself what a coward sounds like. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my throat tight. Because I want you to know I remember everything I did. Everything I said. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I know. I nodded, unsure how to respond. He stepped aside, letting me pass to the stairs. I was filling a suitcase when my mother appeared in the doorway of my bedroom. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Please, she said. 5 minutes. I continued packing, but didn't tell her to leave. I failed you, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. When I saw what the fire had done, I didn't know how to help you. I was afraid of doing the wrong thing, of making it worse, of watching you suffer more than you already had. So you decided not to see me at all, I replied flatly. I thought if we didn't draw attention to you, it would be easier. For everyone. She twisted her wedding ring nervously. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. It's too late, I said, zipping the suitcase closed. You can't unerase someone after 8 years. Gianna, please. No. I cut her off. You don't get to feel better about this. You don't get absolution. You had years to change course, and you chose not to. Every day, you chose not to. I brushed past her, suitcase in hand. At the bottom of the stairs, my father waited, his face lined with regret. Your grandmother knew, he said quietly. She saw what we were doing and cut me out of her will because of it. Everything went to you. Good, I replied, meeting his eyes. At least someone in this family had courage. I left without looking back, the door closing softly behind me. That night, Jonah and I sat on the floor of his apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and the realtor listings he'd printed for me. What about this one? He asked, holding up a photo of a downtown loft. Great light for writing. I smiled, the weight of the day gradually lifting. It's perfect, but it's too big for just me. He set the listing down, suddenly serious. It doesn't have to be just you. What do you mean? Move in with me, he said, reaching for my hand. Or I'll move in with you. Wherever. I want to be where you are, Gianna. You're the bravest person I know. I looked at him, this man who had seen my scars and found beauty, who had shown me his own wounds and taught me that vulnerability was strength. For the first time in years, I felt the possibility of a future unburdened by shame. Yes, I whispered, leaning forward to kiss him. 2 weeks later, with a first installment from my trust fund, I made an anonymous donation to the county hospital, enough to fund a new burn unit with state-of-the-art treatment facilities. The only condition, it would be named after Mrs. Ellerby, who had died peacefully in her sleep the previous winter, never knowing how her small acts of kindness had saved me. The media attention continued to grow. Publishers competed for my memoir rights. Speaking invitations arrived daily. But with each interview request came questions about my family, about reconciliation, about forgiveness. I decided to address it once and for all. I wrote an open letter titled, "To Those Who Couldn't Look at Me," and published it in the Sunday edition of the New York Times. Forgiveness is not an obligation of the wounded, I wrote. It is a gift they may choose to give, but never one they owe. To those who turned away when I needed to be seen, I release you from my expectations. I free myself from yours. My scars are not a burden. They are a map of where I've been and what I've survived. Those who cannot bear to look at them reveal more about themselves than about me. The letter resonated far beyond what I'd anticipated. Survivors of all kinds, burn victims, assault survivors, those with visible and invisible scars, reached out to share their stories. They formed online groups, support networks, communities bound by common experience. Meanwhile, Reporters began digging into my past. They interviewed former teachers who had never been told why I'd suddenly transferred. They spoke with neighbors who remembered being instructed not to mention the accident around the Walker family. They uncovered medical records showing missed follow-up appointments, psychological evaluations never scheduled. The public backlash hit my family hard. My father's insurance firm lost clients. My mother's social circle contracted. Tyler and Amy faced uncomfortable questions at college. I took no pleasure in their discomfort, but I felt no responsibility to shield them from it either. They had made their choices. Now they would live with the consequences, just as I had lived with mine. 6 months after the banquet, I received an invitation to speak at the International Conference on Trauma and Resilience in London, a prestigious gathering of medical professionals, psychologists, and survivors. I would be the keynote speaker, addressing an audience of thousands. As Jonah and I boarded the plane, I glanced at the seating chart. In the front row of the auditorium where I would speak, a seat had been reserved, requested, and paid for by someone outside the conference organization. The name on the reservation: Robert Walker. My father. London greeted us with soft rain and gray skies. From our hotel window, I watched people hurrying along the Thames, umbrellas bobbing like black flowers. Jonah wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "Nervous?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. "But not about speaking." He knew without asking. "You don't have to talk to him."
You don't owe him that.
"I know," I said. "But I need to see his face. Need to know why he's here." The conference center buzzed with activity as medical professionals, researchers, and survivors from around the world gathered. My name appeared on banners and programs, my photo, scars and all, displayed prominently at the entrance. No hiding here.
No shadows.
I spent the morning in final preparations, reviewing my speech, meeting with organizers. All the while, a clock ticked in my head, counting down to the moment I would step onto that stage and see if the reserved front row seat was occupied. At precisely 2 p.m., the auditorium lights dimmed. The conference chair approached the microphone. "It is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker," she began. "A woman whose journey from isolation to advocacy has inspired countless survivors worldwide. Please welcome Gianna Walker." The applause was thunderous as I walked onto the stage. I adjusted the microphone, set my notes on the podium, and finally allowed myself to look at the front row. He was there, alone. Older than I remembered from just months ago, his hair grayer, his shoulders slightly stooped. But his eyes, they met mine with an intensity that nearly made me step back. Not hostile, not demanding. Just present. Fully present. I began my speech, titled Identity After Trauma, Reclaiming the Self When Others Look Away. I spoke about the layers of damage, the physical injuries, yes, but also the secondary wounds inflicted by abandonment, by erasure, by the failure of those meant to protect. Trauma divides life into before and after, I said, my voice steady. But the greatest challenge isn't surviving the initial event, it's navigating a world that doesn't know how to witness your pain without turning away. True healing begins when we stop apologizing for the discomfort our wounds cause others. As I spoke, I could see tears streaming down faces throughout the audience. Medical professionals nodded in recognition. Survivors clasped hands with companions. And in the front row, my father sat motionless, absorbing every word. I concluded with a call not for forgiveness, but for honest acknowledgement. "We cannot rewrite the past," I said. "We cannot undo damage once inflicted. But we can choose to stand in the light, scars, wounds, and all, and demand to be seen as complete, not despite our traumas, but with them fully integrated into the people we have become." The audience rose in a standing ovation that continued for nearly 5 minutes. I stood there, allowing the moment to wash over me, not as validation, but as witness to a truth that had taken me years to articulate. As I left the stage, I noticed my father had slipped away during the applause. Part of me felt disappointed, though I wasn't sure what I had expected. Some dramatic reconciliation? Some tearful apology? Life rarely offered such neat resolutions. The remainder of the conference passed in a blur of workshops, panel discussions, and conversations with fellow survivors. On the final evening, as Jonah and I prepared to return to our hotel, an attendant approached with an envelope. "For Ms. Walker," she said. Inside was a short note in my father's handwriting. "I have no right to ask for your time. But if you're willing, I'll be at the hotel garden until midnight."
Dad.
Jonah squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide," he said. The hotel garden was lit by small lanterns that glowed like fireflies among the hedges. My father sat on a bench near the fountain, looking smaller than the man who had once loomed so large in my childhood memories. "Thank you for coming," he said as I approached. I remained standing. "Why are you here?" "To see you," he said simply. "To hear you. To witness what you've become." "You could have done that 8 years ago," I replied. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I have no excuses that matter. Only regrets that keep me awake at night." We talked for nearly an hour. Not about reconciliation or forgiveness, but about truth. He told me how fear had paralyzed him after the accident, how he'd followed my mother's lead because he couldn't face his own failure to protect me, how he'd convinced himself that avoidance was kindness. "Your grandmother saw it clearly," he said. "She told me I was a coward." She was right. As our conversation wound down, he reached into his pocket and withdrew an envelope. "This isn't about money," he said quickly. "You have your inheritance. This is something else." Inside was a deed to our family summer cottage by the lake, the place I'd been told I couldn't visit because of my son's sensitivity. "It's yours," he said. "Do with it what you will. Sell it. Burn it to the ground if that helps. Just know that something that should have been part of your childhood is finally yours." I took the deed without comment and left him sitting in the garden. I didn't offer forgiveness. He didn't ask for it. Some wounds aren't meant to close completely. The following morning, as we prepared to leave London, I received word that my speech had been viewed online over 2 million times. Interview requests flooded in. But one email stood out from a children's burn unit in Boston, asking if I would consider visiting their patients. 2 weeks later, I stood in a brightly colored playroom surrounded by children with bandages, scars, and stories that echoed fragments of my own. I read them, the girl with no shadow, and watched their faces light up with recognition. Afterward, a small girl with burns similar to mine approached shyly. Half her face bore the marks of fire, her right arm wrapped in protective bandages. "You look like me," she whispered, her good eye wide with wonder. I knelt to her level. "Yes," I said, smiling. "And you look like me." I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of my first published story, the one that had started everything. "This is for you," I told her. "Remember that your scars don't define you. They're just part of your story." That evening, back at the loft Jonah and I now shared, I found a letter that had been delivered while we were away. The envelope was yellowed with age, addressed in familiar handwriting, Mrs. Ellerby's. "My dear Gianna," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. But you've found your way, just as I always knew you would. Some people are born into storms they didn't create. The brave ones learn to dance in the rain, to find beauty in the lightning. Keep writing, dear girl. The world needs voices that have known both fire and resurrection." I wept then, not from pain, but from gratitude for the kindness that had sustained me when family could not. In the years that followed, Jonah and I transformed the lake cottage into a creative healing center for burn survivors and trauma victims. We called it Shadow House, a place where those with visible and invisible scars could find their voices through art, writing, and community. My family faded from public view. My mother retreated into volunteer work. My father changed firms. Tyler and Amy graduated and moved to other states. We exchanged occasional emails, birthday cards, brief updates. Not reconciliation, but acknowledgement. It was enough. I found a new family, Jonah, of course, but also the survivors who passed through Shadow House, the rescue dog we adopted, aptly named Phoenix, and eventually the foster children we welcomed, kids with their own trauma histories who needed to see adults who had survived and thrived. My story became a best-selling memoir, then a stage play performed in theaters across the country. On opening night in New York, I sat in the front row, watching an actress portray my journey from shadow to light. Later that evening, I stood before the bathroom mirror in our hotel suite, a ritual I'd maintained since childhood. But this time, I didn't study my scars for flaws or angles that might be less noticeable. I didn't practice expressions to minimize the damage. Instead, I smiled, fully genuinely, at the woman I had become. Not to spite the fire, but because of it. Not in spite of those who had looked away, but because I had finally learned to see myself clearly. "You made it," I whispered to my reflection. The scars responded by catching the light, shimmering like silver threads woven through the tapestry of my face, not a flaw, but a testament to a life fully claimed and fiercely lived. Would you still recognize the person you tried to forget if they stood before you, scars and all? Like, subscribe, and share for more stories that burn away pretense and illuminate truth.